My name is Evelyn Moore, and I am 68 years old. On Sundays, I make chicken soup because that is what steadies my hands. I skim the fat. I crush a pinch of oregano between my fingers, and I taste the broth with the same spoon my mother used. Today, the steam fogs my glasses as I carry the bowls to the table where my son, David, sits beside his wife, Nicole, and across from my grandson, Eli, whose sneakers swing above the floor like a metronome I can't quite keep time with. Careful. It's hot, I say, setting a bowl in front of Nicole. She doesn't move her phone aside. She doesn't look up. She gives me that sideways smile that always feels like a draft under a closed door. I place the last bowl before Eli, and when I straighten, Nicole finally raises her head. Her lipstick is perfect. A sharp little red that could cut paper. She leans over my bowl and spits. The sound is small but filthy, like a drop from a cellar pipe. A clear thread lands on the surface and wobbles there, refusing to sink. "Eat up, Evelyn," she says softly, as if she's sharing a secret with a friend. "You won't get this kind of service in a nursing home." The room shrinks. The clock ticks too loud. David stares at the table as if reading something written there, something only he can see. Eli's spoon clatters to the placemat, and his blue eyes jump to mine. I want to say it's okay. Sweetheart. I want to say it's nothing. But even my breath is careful now, as if one wrong inhale could pull the whole kitchen into my chest and drown me in it. I look at the bowl, my soup. I see my mother's hands in mine. That old spoon. The steam like a thin veil trying so hard to be mercy. I wait for the part of me that should scream. It doesn't come. What arrives instead is a hard, quiet place I didn't know I'd been building. Brick by brick. Through all the little slights that didn't leave marks. "Thank you," I say, and my voice is calm enough to scare me. I'm not hungry after all. I reach for the bowl, lift it, and carry it to the sink. The garbage disposal hums like a distant train. When I turn back, Nicole is still smiling, and David is still silent, and Eli is still looking at me as if I can fix everything. I can't fix everything, but I can fix this. When I walked out of that kitchen, I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look back. I just took my purse from the hook, slipped on the old gray cardigan I keep by the door, and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain and rosemary, and for a moment, I couldn't tell if the wetness on my face was drizzle or the soup that had burned my pride. David didn't come after me. I heard the sound of Eli calling my name, a soft "Grandma" that cracked halfway through. But then Nicole's voice drowned it out, sharp and flat, like a screen door slapping shut. The street was quiet. Sunday quiet. I stood by my car and waited for my hands to stop shaking before I could fit the key into the ignition. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered. Same silver hair, same kind eyes, but there was something new there too. Something solid. I drove to my apartment on the south side of town, a small place above the florist shop where the air always smelled faintly of lilies. Inside, the lamp on the counter flickered the way it always did when the heater kicked in. I hung up my cardigan and sat down on the couch, still wearing my shoes. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I reached for the small wooden box that had been sitting on my bookshelf for months. It was the last thing my sister Ruth mailed me before she passed. I'd never opened it because I wasn't ready to face another goodbye. Tonight felt like the right time. Inside, there was a letter, yellowed at the folds. Ruth's handwriting was neat and stubborn, just like her. "Evie," she wrote, "I know you'll roll your eyes, but I've left you the house in Salem. The taxes are small, and there's a bit of money in my savings. Use it to start something of your own. You spent too long taking care of others. Promise me you'll do something that belongs only to you." The paper trembled in my hands. I pressed it to my chest, and for the first time all day, the tears came quietly. I called Mr. Garner, Ruth's old lawyer, the next morning. He remembered me by voice. "Ruth always said you were the one with a backbone," he said, chuckling. "Guess she was right." We met that week. The transfer was simple. The house was mine now. White siding, chipped porch, a garden that hadn't been touched in years, and the savings, $60,000, just sitting there, waiting for me to remember who I used to be. At the bank, I realized something else. My monthly pension deposits were still going into the joint account David had set up for convenience. I remembered how he convinced me years ago, saying it was easier to pay the bills that way. Maybe it had been, back then. But now, that word felt like a leash. The clerk asked, "Would you like to open a new account, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "Just in my name." When I left, I stood outside the bank with the paperwork in my hands. The wind tugged at my hair, and I could almost hear Ruth's laugh in it. That night, I packed a single suitcase, just clothes, my sewing machine, and the framed picture of Eli at his school play. The next morning, I left town before dawn. The drive to Salem took 4 hours. I watched the sky lighten from slate to honey, and every mile felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. When I reached the house, the paint was peeling, but the bones were good. The key turned easily, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. There was a smell of cedar and something faintly sweet. Ruth's perfume, maybe. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the old furniture, the windows that faced the garden. The tomato vines outside were wild and tangled, but stubbornly alive. I spent the first few days cleaning, repairing, finding small pieces of myself in every corner. On the third morning, I brewed coffee and sat on the back steps, watching the sun hit the garden for the first time in a long time. No one was talking over me. No one was telling me what I could or couldn't do. I didn't feel lonely. I felt possible. Later that week, my phone buzzed. It was a message from David. "Mom, where are you? Nicole's upset. Can you come back so we can talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed, "I'm safe. I'll reach out when I'm ready." I didn't press send right away. I watched the blinking cursor like it was waiting for me to lose nerve. Then I hit send. That night, as I lay in bed under the quilt Ruth had made, I replayed Nicole's face, that cruel half smile, the words she said. And beneath that memory was something sharper, my own silence. I realized the most painful part wasn't what she did. It was that I'd let it happen. That thought didn't hurt. It ignited something. The next morning, I opened the windows wide, letting the cold air in, and made a list, not of chores or groceries, but of small promises. To cook for myself, to fix the garden, to rebuild, quietly, completely. The kettle whistled. I poured the tea and smiled. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. And beginnings. I was learning. Didn't have to start with kindness. They could start with the soft sound of a door closing, for good. The first weeks in Salem were quiet in a way I hadn't known in years. The mornings began with the sound of the neighbors' wind chimes and the slow creak of the porch when I stepped outside with my coffee. I'd sit there, wrapped in Ruth's old flannel robe, watching the mist roll off the trees behind the fence. The air smelled clean, untouched by anyone's temper. The house was a mess, but it was my mess. I scrubbed the floors until my knees ached, painted the walls the pale yellow Ruth loved, and patched the roof with the help of a local handyman named Curtis, who always whistled gospel tunes while he worked. When he finished, he leaned on the ladder and said, "Place just needs some love. Ma'am, it's got good bones." So did I. I thought, the garage became my small workshop. Ruth had left behind her sewing table, sturdy and scarred from years of use. I started repairing clothes for neighbors, hemming jeans, fixing zippers, patching quilts. One woman from the church, Marlene, brought me a box of fabric scraps and said, "You should start selling these. Folks around here love handmade things." I laughed at first, but within a month, the garage smelled like thread and detergent, and I had more orders than time. I called it Evie's Stitch, printed simple cards, and stuck them on the bulletin board at the diner. For the first time since my husband died, I had something that was only mine. Eli called one evening from David's phone. His voice was small. "Grandma, are you mad at Daddy?" "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I just needed a little space." "Mom yells a lot," he whispered. "She says you're never coming back." My throat tightened. "You tell her. I'll always be where love is. Okay?" There was silence. Then his tiny voice said, "Okay." When the call ended, I sat by the window for a long time, the moonlight pooling across the floor like spilled milk. I wanted to drive back that very night, but I remembered Ruth's letter, her words, "Do something that belongs only to you." So I stayed. 3 months later, I heard from David again, but this time it wasn't a call. It was him, standing on my porch, hat in hand, shoulders slumped like a boy who'd lost his way home. "Mom," he started, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chipped mug I handed him. He didn't touch the coffee. "Nicole left," he said finally. "She took most of the savings. I didn't stop her." He looked at his hands, rough from work. "I should have protected you back then. Instead, I let her." I stopped him. "You don't have to explain." "David, we all see the truth when we're ready." "I don't know what to do," he said. "I can't afford the house anymore. They're threatening to foreclose. Eli's scared all the time." Something in me softened and hardened at once. The mother in me wanted to fix it. The woman in me remembered the taste of that moment when he said nothing while his wife humiliated me. "David," I said gently, "I'll help you, but not the way I used to." He looked up, confused. "I'll rent the house in Brookdale to you," I said. "You can stay there with Eli until you're steady again, but I'll need a lease in writing, and the mortgage payments go straight to the bank, not through you." He blinked. "Mom, you'd do that for me?" "For you?" "Yes," I said, "but you have to promise me something. Anything. Never let silence become cruelty again. It's a slow kind, but it kills just the same." He nodded, eyes wet. "I promise." That night, after he left, I sat on the porch again. The stars were sharp and clear. I thought about how love changes when it's tested. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes it just finds a quieter shape. A week later, David called to tell me he'd moved into the Brookdale house. Eli was thrilled. He had his own room, a backyard, and a promise from me that he could visit every weekend. On his first visit, Eli ran straight into my arms, smelling of grass and peanut butter. "Grandma, can I help in the garden?" "Of course," I said, handing him a trowel. We dug side by side, pulling weeds, planting tomato seedlings in neat little rows. His laughter filled the air. And I thought, this is what freedom sounds like. Business was picking up, too. Marlene helped me set up a small stand at the weekend market. People loved the handmade aprons, the patchwork bags. Sometimes they'd stay just to talk. One man bought a table runner and said, "You remind me of my mother. She used to sew by the radio." Those words warmed something inside me. Maybe healing wasn't loud. Maybe it was this, slow, deliberate, and stitched one thread at a time. Then one evening, as I closed up shop, I saw a figure standing by the fence. "Nicole." She looked thinner, her face drawn tight. "You really made a new life," she said, her tone flat. I set down my basket. "I did." She laughed, a sharp sound. "You think you're better than me? You ruined my marriage." "No," I said quietly. "I didn't ruin it. I just stopped feeding what was already dying." Her eyes flashed. "I want my son back." "Talk to David," I said. "It's his decision now." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "You think you can just walk away from everything? You'll end up alone." "Maybe," I said, meeting her gaze. "But at least I'll be alone with peace." She turned and stormed off, her heels striking the pavement like anger, looking for a place to land. That night, I couldn't sleep. The confrontation left a sour taste, but beneath it was relief. Nicole's words no longer pierced me. They barely touched. I walked out to the garden, the moonlight spilling across the rows of tomato plants. The leaves brushed against my hands like whispers. I thought about how plants grow back after being cut, and how maybe people can too. When I went back inside, my phone buzzed again. A text from David. "Mom, thank you. Eli's doing better. He asks about you every night." I smiled, typing back, "Tell him I'll see him this weekend, and tell him the tomatoes are waiting." As I set the phone down, a calm warmth settled over me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the old fool Nicole once called me. I felt like someone who had finally learned how to begin again. 2 months later, the air in Salem started to turn crisp, and the tomato vines in my garden began to brown at the edges. Eli was helping me pull the last of them when my phone rang. It was David, his voice tight. "Mom, she's back. Nicole, she's trying to get the house." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean? Get the house?" "She said she's still on the mortgage paperwork, and she's threatening to call a lawyer." I wiped my hands on my apron, my mind already sharpening. "You tell her to go ahead and call, and tell her I'll bring mine." The next morning, I met David at the old house in Brookdale. The yard was overgrown, the windows dusty. Nicole's car sat in the driveway like a shadow that didn't belong. She was standing on the porch when I arrived, arms crossed, a smirk curling her mouth. "Well, look who decided to crawl back," she said. "You think you can just hand my house to him and walk away?" "It's not your house," I said calmly. "It's mine. Always has been. You were just living here." Her eyes narrowed. "You old witch! I should have known you'd pull something like this." David stepped between us. "Nicole, please, don't do this here." But she wasn't listening. She jabbed her finger toward me. "You've poisoned my family. You think you can make me look like the villain?" I looked at her. Really looked. The dark circles under her eyes, the bitterness sitting like a stain on her skin. Once, she might have been kind. Maybe life had just hollowed her out. Still, I wasn't going to let her hollow me, too. "I don't need to make you look like anything," I said softly. "You've done that yourself." She stepped forward, her voice cracking. "I'll call the police. You'll see. You'll regret." "That's a good idea," I interrupted, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Let's call them together." Her mouth opened, then shut. I dialed, calm as the sky above us. When the officer arrived, I handed him a folder, copies of the deed. The mortgage transfer. Every document Mr. E. Garner had filed. He flipped through them, nodded once, and turned to Nicole. "Ma'am, this property legally belongs to Mrs. Moore. If you have a dispute, you'll need to take it to civil court." Nicole's face went pale. She looked at David, searching for help, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. She let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, keep your damn house. You'll die alone in it anyway." She turned to leave, but I called after her, not in anger, just quiet truth. "Nicole, I hope you find peace somewhere, because all that hate, it'll eat you faster than time ever could." She froze for a second, then walked away without looking back. When the police car drove off, the silence that followed was heavy but clean, like the air after a storm. David stood there, rubbing his hands together. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, "for all of it." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't be sorry, be better. For Eli." He nodded, tears streaking down his cheeks. "I will, I promise." Eli peeked from the doorway, holding his little stuffed bear. "Is Mommy gone?" he asked. David crouched beside him. She's gonna take some time away, buddy." Eli looked at me. "Grandma, are you mad at her?" I smiled gently. "No, sweetheart. I'm just done letting people hurt me." He nodded, though I'm not sure he fully understood. He came running into my arms, and for a long moment, I just held him, feeling his small heartbeat against mine. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the kitchen of that house for the first time since I'd left it months ago, the same kitchen where Nicole had spat in my soup. The same light flickered above the stove, but the air was different now, lighter, freer. I poured myself a cup of tea and set it on the table, the steam rising in soft curls. The seat across from me was empty, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I took a sip, and it was warm, steady, mine, outside. The wind brushed the windows, carrying the faint scent of tomatoes from the garden miles away. I smiled. The garden had grown, the house had survived, and so had I. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was standing where I belonged. Winter came softly to Salem. The mornings turned silver, the air crisp enough to see my breath as I walked through the garden that had once been wild. The tomato vines were gone now, replaced by rows of winter herbs and small wooden stakes. Eli painted himself on one. He had written in crooked letters, "Grandma's Garden of Peace." Every Saturday, David and Eli drove down for breakfast. The sound of Eli's laughter filled the kitchen again, bouncing off the walls like light. David helped me fix the shutters, sometimes staying late to share coffee and stories about his new job. He was learning the trade of electrical work, and though his hands were rough, there was pride in them again. One evening, after Eli had gone to bed, David said quietly, "Mom, I don't know how you forgave me." I looked at him, the lines of age and regret on both our faces. "I didn't," I said honestly. "I just stopped carrying the weight of it. Life's heavy enough without adding yesterday to it." He nodded, eyes glistening, and for the first time, I saw peace in his smile. When they left the next morning, Eli ran back to hug me twice. "Don't forget to water my plants, Grandma," he said, waving from the car window. I stood there long after they were gone, watching the mist rise from the fields. Inside, the kettle whistled, a small, familiar sound that now meant comfort, not loneliness. I poured the tea, set it beside a bowl of chicken soup, and sat by the window. The soup's steam curled upward, catching the sunlight. And I thought of that day months ago when I'd watched it ripple with shame. Now, it was different. The steam smelled of rosemary and peace. I took a spoonful and smiled to myself. Sometimes revenge isn't fire or fury. It's silence, warmth, and the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt. I wasn't the old fool anymore. I was just Evelyn Moore, finally home. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.